Okay, good morning. We're here with Security Program Manager Milad Aslaner. How you doing, Milad?
Hey man, I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
All is good. First of all, I guess congratulations. It's been quite a week of announcements for your team. Do you want to tell us what you've been up to, guys, instead of conquering the world of all the operating systems that you can support out there?
Sure, yes. So Microsoft Defender ATP, we support now beyond Windows, obviously, Windows Server. We also support Mac OS, and then the recent announcements is for Linux as well as for Android.
That was quite a quick spree of announcements that I saw this week. I'm assuming that you can't talk about an iOS announcement coming out soon, or is that something that you can talk about?
Yeah, sure. Like we mentioned it also at the previous Microsoft Ignite conference, iOS will be the next big thing that we're going to focus on. We basically want to make sure that where our users are, that we have the full protection stack of Microsoft there.
Look, honestly, congratulations, because we all love that approach that Microsoft has taken to not be afraid of other OSs and embracing the ecosystem and actually delivering services to it. So well done. And I know how hard the team is working on it. We've been working together for a while now, and I've seen the product evolve over that, and it's just been an absolute awesome ride. So well done. I guess there's a couple of things that I wanted to talk about today that I thought could be interesting. So we've been working a lot alongside you guys with Azure Sentinel, and obviously how we use Azure Sentinel and consume the ecosystem of security products within Microsoft, be it Azure Security Center, Defender ATP, MCAS, all these other kind of amazing security products that you're putting out there. And one of them that we've been using a lot in that journey, obviously from the beginning, has been Defender ATP, but we've seen it pivot from almost like a specialist EDR type solution to also now start embracing a lot more compliance aspects to it. So it's almost becoming a full suite of offerings for endpoint around compliance, around security. Do you want to talk a little bit about that strategy? Is this a concerted effort, or where's that pressure coming from, and where are you trying to take the platform towards?
Yeah, sure. So if I think about like the big islands in an enterprise, right? There is IT and its operations. There is compliance, and then there is security, right? And if you look into the technologies within these pillars, you can pretty much say that Microsoft is providing endpoint solution for all these buckets, right? What we've been doing for the last couple of years is bringing these technologies that are best of breed together into a suite, right? So that boils down to, from an IT perspective, we want to make sure that whenever it's about managing a device, right, that users or the IT department can go to devicemanagement.microsoft.com. We want to make sure that whenever it's about compliance, DLP, information protection, all these capabilities, that the customer can just go to compliance.microsoft.com. And we want to make sure that when it's about threat protection, that the customer can go to security.microsoft.com when it comes to like their digital forensics and incident response activities, right? And then, of course, we want to make sure that to centralize all these, right? If the customer needs a SIEM and or a SOAR solution, that the customer can go to Azure and access their Azure Sentinel instance, right? So we try to pivot away from these individual products, quote unquote, and making sure that there's an integrated story that essentially is targeting specific personas in an organization, right? So we're targeting the security analysts, we're targeting the compliance officers, the compliance managers, and we're targeting the IT pros, bringing them all the information across the different products that they may use in a variety of ways into one single pane of glass.
To be honest, it's been super rewarding to see it from a service provider even perspective, because it's enabling us to really bring it all together under the Sentinel banner, and then the force multiplier you get out of Sentinel when you also then connect it to these other parts of the Microsoft ecosystem is just exponential. As you said, it's not just the centralizing the SIEM, but it's the SOAR element, it's the machine learning elements, it's the threat intelligence integration. It's just exponentially getting better and better and more complex, which it's a massive pivot from where Microsoft was 10 years ago. So what you've done in that short span of time is just absolutely mind blowing. So awesome. Well, let's keep going in that direction because we love it. We are working at the moment a lot with different personas around Azure Sentinel as well, right? So we have customers in public sector, we have customers in legal firms, we have customers in oil and gas. It's a really kind of traverses all industries, this solution stack, because the problems traverse the industries as well. One of the use cases we've been coming across a lot is the expansion into the IoT world. So using IoT Hub and all the beautiful telemetry you can get from that, this is something that's starting to become bread and butter for us. And I haven't seen Defender ATP yet pivot to that part of an enterprise or an organization. Is that something that Defender ATP is looking to get under its banner, another endpoint that you're looking to protect? Or are you always going to maintain the separation between IoT and kind of thicker devices?
Yeah, so I think it's the way I would think about it, right? There are two environments, like when it comes to IoT, right? There's these managed IoT devices, and then there are unmanaged IoT devices, right? And I think from a Microsoft standpoint, we do have coverage for IoT coming through, for example, Azure Security Center, right? Yep. They have capabilities in order to secure the IoT instances, right? And then if I think about like an endpoint perspective, right? If I look into Windows 10, like one of the builds for Windows 10 is Windows 10 IoT, right? Which we do support from a Microsoft Defender ATP perspective, right? But I think it goes always down to like, what is the challenge that an organization has? And then we ask ourselves, like, what can we do today and what can we do better in the future, right? And if there is an opportunity where we can help customers to be more secure, to be able to detect faster breaches, to be able to respond faster in a more effective way, we will definitely invest into that.
Yeah, I think, and that was almost like a feature request you can consider that. So we use Azure Sphere, we use Azure IoT Hub. So from a telemetry perspective, fantastic way to water and feed into Sentinel, into Azure Monitor, get all that telemetry. What we're desiring, to be honest, almost as incident responders, would be the outwards ability to contain, right? So if we detect something, to be able to take a proactive stance on that you have with containment in Azure and then Defender ATP, but we don't have an equivalent capability. So it'd be super interesting to see where Microsoft moves in that direction. Look, again, I thank you so much for your time today. Is there anything out there at the moment that you're feeling that you would like to bring up, or anything you want to comment on, or any ideas that you've been having that you want to discuss?
Sure. I think there are a number of things, right? The number one, I think today, given all the circumstances resulting out of COVID-19, is that organizations need to think on how they are securing remote worker environments, right? How they enable work from home, how they secure these BYOD kind of devices now. Because if, quote unquote, if we want it or not, they are now active. They are accessing corporate services and resources, right? So I
actually saw your post on Zero Trust Teams, which I quite loved. I think it was early this morning that you put that one up.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I think that's like one of the key areas folks need to pay attention on now. Like they've been, of course, giving the circumstance many like fast decisions that happened within an organization in order to enable workers to work remotely. I think now it's a good time to also revisit these in order to make sure that they are delivered as a project from a secure perspective, right? That you, of course, have the telemetry in order to detect and respond, that you try to prevent as much as possible upcoming attacks, right? So that's like one area, right? And I think things like, of course, multi-factor authentication and conditional access are fundamental when it comes to that area. The other one is, I think, what many people underestimate maybe is making use of existing investments, right? So very often, I think because also I work for one of the vendors, people will look at me and ask me like, okay, what is the product I should buy in order to be secure, right? And I think the question should be more like, what do I have today, and how do I maximize these investments first, right?
You're touching a soft spot of mine, and I talk about that quite openly. So I want to cover the 2 points because there were some really good comments to make on that one. So let's start with the last one. We gave a talk a couple of months ago, still when people were meeting face to face in an event, and the whole premise of the talk was I think there's a lot of irresponsible spending out there and a lot of irresponsible complaints where I hear budget holders saying, oh, we're underfunded for security. We keep going to the board and asking for more money and they're not funding us securely. How can they expect us to do our work? But then if you flip that around and you ask them, and I did in the event, which was fascinating, how much of your investment do you think you're utilizing to its full extent? So can you put your hand on your heart and tell me that you're using 100% of the features of the products that you bought? And the answer was no. And the kind of the balance in the audience was that they think that they're utilizing around 60% of what they're paying. So my premise was, so you're telling me that 40% of the money that you've already been given and you spent, you've actually spent it in something you're not using. But at the same time, you're complaining that your business is not funding security correctly. Sorry, but you've just spent it responsibly. So I completely agree. I think, and to be completely fair here, Microsoft is an interesting conversation to have because your licensing model, it could be complex. Let's just put it slightly sometimes. So we go into customers and we work with customers a lot to try to get them to use the features that they're already licensed for more effectively, because I think a lot of people have E5, for example, but they're using probably 30% of the things in it. We come across customers that know they have MCAS, but they've never even implemented it. And MCAS properly deployed is amazing. It's one of the best products you guys have. So do you think there's an option there to try to make that a little bit more easy to consume, a little bit easier to deploy?
Yeah, I think there is definitely opportunity, right? And I think one of the reasons like why the team where I'm a part of exists is being the customer voice inside the engineering team. Yeah. So we've been hearing feedback throughout the years, of course, about licensing and the different SKUs. And I think we started responding to that, right? If I look back a few years back, we were talking about these individual SKUs per product, right? Today we are talking more about suites and more about consumption-based packages and so on and subscriptions, right? Yeah. So today, if a customer chooses any security or compliance workload, right? So there's typically like a standalone version, and then there are the suite versions with different products within that box, right? So I think the best example would be like M365 and the E5 security SKU. It brings you like Office 365 ATP for your mail, Defender ATP for your endpoint, Azure ATP for your domain controller, as well as Microsoft Cloud App Security, right? So these are things that we are doing already. And then to make it, I think, even easier in terms of onboarding, what we start doing is we provide more like self-service guidance on our portals, right? So there are now evaluation guides available for these products, like Microsoft Threat Protection, on how you get started as fast as possible with these technologies. And then what we also did quite recently is that for Microsoft Threat Protection, if you even have just one of those SKUs that are applicable for the product, so product like Office ATP, Defender ATP, MCAS, or Azure ATP, it's just on for you, right? So you don't need to essentially go into a portal, try to find somewhere where you click on it, and then it enables and provisions something. Microsoft Threat Protection is just there for you if you have one of those products already in use, right? So we hear that feedback, and we are responding to that.
No, it's good to see it, and to be completely honest, the support you provided as partners as well to be able to articulate that for the customers has been great. So it's been a good conversation to have, to be able to demonstrate that it's getting better, and that if you're stuck, there's engineering that can be done by your partners there to help. So I'm sure the partner ecosystem in general is appreciative of that improvement. So well done. Going back to your previous point, you were talking about protecting remote workers. We've seen a massive amount of adoption, as everybody else, of remote technologies. Everybody's working from home. We haven't come across a blocker in the adoption of those. If anything, what we've noticed is a certain amount of vertigo by how quickly these technologies can be adopted, which has been an interesting pivot, right? So it used to be that IT transformation was this very slow moving train. IT transformation and the adoption of these technologies was sometimes the work of a weekend at the moment, which kind of really demonstrates and validates the power of cloud. What do you think is now the challenge? So we demonstrated through COVID, in a really unfortunate circumstance, that adopting these technologies was actually simple. And there are some security exposures that have been left as part of that quick adoption, right? People leaving legacy authentication enabled, people rolling out MFA for some accounts, but not the service accounts. So you have your typical risks there that people are continuing to live with, and that unfortunately very often result in a breach. So it's not the cloud that is getting breached. It's actually the legacy state that they've forgotten to secure or shut down or protect as they've adopted this. So all those fears that people had about cloud being more insecure have been really proven incorrect. And it's still the old kind of Windows server that had an RDP exposed that they never knew about with a service account that was brute forceable that's causing the breaches. What is this? What you guys are seeing internally as well? Is this Microsoft's strategy to try to provide a safe by default for that legacy estate, or are you just trying to move people to the cloud as quickly as possible because it's so obviously more secure if done right?
Yeah, I think there are a few aspects to that, right? So first, like you're spot on, right? I think the reason why adopting new technologies has become easier is pure fact that all the previous like infrastructure planning and stage deployments and so on might still happen for some of the technologies, but they're happening in the cloud, right? And once they're happening in the cloud, it's usually way quicker in order to get to production essentially for any technology, right? And yeah, we've seen it with Defender ATP. I mean, Defender ATP, the sensor is part of the operating system. All you really have to do is to turn it on, right? So that's of course a huge opportunity for customers to roll out new security controls much quicker than compared to before. I think in terms of actual risk, right? To your point, it goes back to, unfortunately, like every time we have these kind of conversations, I always hope to like come up with these new 5 things that everybody should be doing.
So it's that's the 5 for 3, right?
Yeah, but it's more or less always the same list, right? It's like patch.
Yeah, multi-factor.
Like multi-factor, right? Make sure that devices only have access to corporate resources they absolutely need with role-based authentication. Make sure that if their device or identity is suspected to be compromised, that they lose access, right? And leverage as much as possible of your stack, right? So, example like maintenance technologies like Microsoft Threat Protection or Azure Sentinel and stuff, they have these orchestration or automation capabilities, but you got to use them, right? You got to use them for your advantage. Like you literally have like a free stock analyst that Microsoft provides you in these technologies, and then you don't use them, right? So you want to use them, particularly in these days.
Yeah, no, look, and that's 100% of what we do, right? So we provide that engineering for companies that acknowledge that they just cannot skill up fast enough to run and detect those things. So I completely agree. The value of these technologies comes when you actually use them, you consume the output, you make smart decisions on the back of that output. So absolutely echoing yours. Milad, it's been absolutely pleasure to see you again. I'm sorry for the distance. I would have loved to be able to do this one in Dubai under different circumstances. I look forward to being able to catch up again with you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you having me here.
Good to see you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Say bye.